Hey everybody, just a quick warning here. We talk about youth pastors, so therefore we're going to talk about some awful things that some youth pastors do. So just a little trigger warning for you there. As well, there's a mild spoiler for Spider-Man No Way Home, so just be aware of that too, if you haven't seen Spider-Man No Way Home. I love the show Righteous Gemstones on HBO. One of the details I love about that show is that Calvin the youth pastor has a faux hawk and is constantly trying to be hip. You see, once upon a time, I was a youth pastor. I was a youth ministry major in Bible college. I did an internship under a youth pastor, and I was a youth group volunteer for many years, as well as a teen camp volunteer for a few summers. So I have met many youth pastors, and in the early to mid-2000s, the haircut of choice for youth pastors was the faux hawk.
Can I get an amen?
Now I think it's beards and whatever you call this hair. It's hard to tell from the mugshots. Subscribing and commenting and all that wonderful stuff. You are all wonderful, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much. As well, we put the links down below for our social media, as well as the Patreon and merch and all that wonderful stuff. Thanks again. Thank you for being awesome. You're the best. If you hate job interviews, you would really hate youth pastor job interviews. They are so strange. They are allowed to ask you questions that you would not be allowed to ask in most job interviews. Like, how often you look at naughty images? That's a real question I had. They can ask you if you are married. This question is usually because they would love to hire two people for the price of one, because it's just assumed that the youth pastor's wife is going to work for them for free.
No, sir, I have no experience, but I'm a big fan of money. I like it. I use it. I have a little. I keep it in a jar on top of my refrigerator. I'd like to put more in that jar. That's where you come in.
It took me a while to find a youth pastor job. I wasn't married, I didn't play guitar, and I wasn't what you'd typically think of when you think of a youth pastor.
You gonna go into battle dressed as a cool youth pastor, or you got your suit? Okay.
What a lot of churches wanted was someone who knew what the kids were into and had their finger on the pulse of culture.
Sometimes, trends change, styles change, and we need to be culturally relevant, no doubt. Jesus obviously, when he was speaking, he knew the audience he was speaking to, and therefore was relevant to them, and that helped, connect and captivate the audience. But I think, if we become so caught up in the methods and we miss the message, we dilute ultimately what Christianity is all about.
Right.
Which really meant they were looking for a guy with weird hair and way too much confidence. So these guys were hired first.
As you can tell, I am not Pastor Stephen. I'm a little taller. If we haven't had the privilege of meeting, my name is Tim Summers, and I get the honor and privilege of being the youth pastor here at Elevation.
The guys who always find a way to mention how attractive their wives are for some reason.
And that's my beautiful family, my gorgeous wife. That's my queen. She got me buzzing.
And when they speak, it's big movements.
So there we are, me and David walking. If you just take the walk, we do the speed walk. You know what the speed walk is? Where the lower body's running a 40-yard dash, but the upper body's reclined in a chair. You know what I'm saying? It's like this. You know what I'm saying? No one looks good doing this, okay? Some of you mall walkers, yeah, what's up?
I remember the first time my mom did that to me, she said, "Ben, I have had it up to here." I've always been motivational. I said, "Mom, can you have it up to here?" That's 2 feet where I can keep on playing.
And then they bring it down. They get real. And pretty soon, we're talking about the Lord.
What's it gonna look like? How did life just get so serious? How did life become to this place where I'm not sure how I got here, but I'm here? And even though my Instagrams look like one thing, the life that I'm living that everyone else is liking, I don't like the life that I'm living. And maybe for you, you know this feeling.
It's not perfect. But let me ask you something, kid. And I don't know if you guys can see through these screens, but let me ask you guys tonight. Through the messiness, through the ugliness, can you still see the heart? Sometimes in the messiness of life, we experience heart the most.
John never intended for any of this to happen, but Jesus did. Jesus knew a little bit more than John did, which can kind of be hard to understand. Oh, Jesus knows more than me? That's how we act sometimes. That's how we live. I know better than God. I'm stepping on toes.
Use attention-grabbing sermon series to be able to bring in new kids. And so 2 of those series that I used to do variations of that worked really, really well. Number 1 was sex and dating, right? So anytime you talk about sex or dating, or if you literally just have a series called Sex and Dating, which I did, then a ton of kids are gonna flood out and they're probably gonna tell their friends, and you can literally draw a crowd and a bunch of unchurched kids simply by saying, hey, let your friends know Wednesday night we're gonna be talking about sex.
That is terrible advice. Maybe the worst advice I saw in all the youth group training videos I watched for this thing. There is no better way for a youth pastor to make a bunch of parents angry than by talking about sex with their kids without getting permission from them first. And to do it where you're inviting a bunch of kids that don't go to your church, now you're inviting angry parents from all over town. What are you thinking?
Those idiots don't even know where we live.
But to be fair, youth groups are very weird places. Like, you go to this place where they play these strange games.
Oreo to the mouth. This is super simple. You have probably seen this before, but as a quick little reminder, you take a little Oreo, you put it on your eye, and you have to move the Oreo from your eye to your mouth without using your hands or your body parts. If it falls down, you have to start over again.
Like a T-Rex little mini hand. Little mini hands. And then you get some tape and you tape them around so that their arms stay
so like across their forearms, so their arms are stuck up
across
like
their forearms, around their back, across their forearms, around their back. If you're listening, not watching, you might want to watch because you can see my little T-Rex hands. And once everyone's taped up, what you do is you just like piñata the stage. You just scatter candy all over it. And it's helpful if each T-Rex has like maybe a partner to hold a bucket for them or a bag, and they have to get down and
any way possible
and pick up the candy.
Or sometimes dangerous games.
Actually, Josh and I are going to play just because we want the younger generation to know what youth ministry was built on is the game called Chubby Bunny. Oh. And the idea with Chubby Bunny is you would just put as many marshmallows as you could and still be able to say Chubby Bunny.
And whoever got the most marshmallows in is the winner.
Who could still say Chubby Bunny.
Yeah,
but I think people choked. I think there was a couple people that died during the game, so they outlawed it. That was why it was called outlawed.
Sorry for bringing up bad memories.
Back and started army crawling towards the position that they had to capture the flag, right? So I wanted to freak them out, and so hearing them in the front of the sanctuary, I lit a bottle rocket and placed it on the ground and shot it into the back of the sanctuary. I thought, oh, place it on the ground so it doesn't hit anybody in the eye, and I'll shoot it in the back of the sanctuary to scare them because they're in the front of the sanctuary. Nope, it just so happened that they were actually army crawling on their bellies in the back of the sanctuary, and so I hit a 16-year-old kid in the face with a bottle rocket and it exploded in his eyeball. One of the dumbest things I've ever done, right?
I don't think this guy should be making videos about how to run a youth group.
For this game, you'll need a large room that can be made completely dark. Now, you may want to cover any exit lights or windows if you can.
Please don't cover the exit signs. Yeah, I've seen youth leaders do this for games like this. The last person you want to anger is the fire marshal. Don't do that.
While the lights are off, the killers need to go around the room and kill as many people as they can by tapping people on their head. Now, if a student is tapped on their head, they're dead and they must fall on the ground and freeze. When anyone in the group walks into a dead body, they must yell, "Body, body." The lights then come on straight away and everyone freezes.
This is the type of game that if somebody pitched it to me at a planning meeting, I would just go through a list of all the ways that people will hurt themselves. But I was also okay with a game where we duct tape kids to the wall, which is also really dangerous. There was one kid that started suffocating because his arms were up and he was basically being crucified. So yeah, don't do that one either. But see, the games weren't just there for the game's sake. They were there to break the ice so you could set up for the message, or simply so that you could start building relationships with these kids.
With your message. When I wrote Purpose-Driven Youth Ministry, I had a line in there under fun that says, students can't be theologically aware until they're sociologically comfortable.
Yeah, I didn't understand any of those words, but thank you for that. It's very wise.
When you feel comfortable in an environment, then all of a sudden, okay, now I'll listen to what you have to say about God.
So today's top 5 is 5 pro tips to make sure that you're running the best games that you possibly can. That's awesome.
And here's the other thing. You don't laugh with your enemies. You laugh with your friends. Why we think games are important.
Because building relationships was always one of the main goals of youth group.
All right, so out of all my years in youth ministry, I think the single most important thing about being a good youth leader is relationship. Right? At the end of the day, teenagers are actually much better at telling whether or not someone is authentic than adults are. And so one of the biggest things that you can do, right, the old maxim of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? That goes double for youth ministry. And so while we're going to be talking about some different strategies and things that you can do to reach new kids and to grow your youth group, I think ultimately everything comes down to relationships.
So wisdom for somebody starting over in a youth ministry or just starting in a youth ministry?
Wisdom is, honestly, you want to take your time just getting to know people and really earning the trust, because they're not going to follow you if they don't know who you are. If they don't.
I think relational youth ministry is any time that you could have a conversation with a student, whether it's in your office, whether it's in at youth group, on the weekends, midweek, whatever. Anytime that you get a chance to be one-on-one with a student, that's relational youth ministry.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about Jesus or whether you're watching stupid cat videos on YouTube, that is relational ministry to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that relationships are the backbone of youth ministry.
Just have to wipe punch you.
Oh, yeah. Well, that would be kind of worthless because I know a ton of 14-year-old girls that could kick his ass.
You know a ton of 14-year-old girls? What belt are they?
This is something I talked about in the Evangelizing is Sales video, and I think it's even more sinister when it's about kids. So this is your job. Your job is to be friends with kids in order to make them like Jesus and keep them in the church. Because that's why you're there. Churches are afraid of losing their kids, so they hire cool people to build a relationship with them. That's a weird job.
Cool. In fact, Jesus was a lot like another famous rebel, Fonzie. But where Fonzie says, "Hey," Jesus says, "Amen."
Is your communication consistent? Are you communicating across multiple mediums? Or do you only communicate to your students from the stage or from the front of the room? If you're only doing that, that's only one medium. Consider what it'd be like to, embrace so many different social media apps, right? Maybe you're Snapchatting to your kids or Instagram stories or whatever, right? Embracing multiple avenues and mediums for communication, but making sure your communication is consistent. Your communication to your students helps create culture.
We're not Snapchatting the kids, right? That's not cool, right?
Handshake.
Eggplant agreement.
Yeah, they got an agreement to make eggplant parmesan.
No, eggplants are dicks in teenage emoji language.
What?
You know what? That's true. Julie told me that the emojis they all have secret meanings.
For you as a youth leader, here's what you need to know. There are generational differences in how people use social media. So what do I mean by that? Well, older folks will generally use social more to reach publicly. Younger folks will use social more to connect personally. So think about your students here for a moment. The vast majority of the time they spend on their phones on social is probably going to be DMing their friends and consuming content rather than publicly sharing content with the world. And this needs to influence how you use social to connect with them. Practically, one thing you can do is set up an Instagram direct group for your students. Groups can have up to 32 people in them, and what this does is it creates a private channel for you and your students with opportunities to connect personally with them.
I don't know what your generation's fascination is with documenting your every thought, but I can assure you they're not all diamonds. Roman is having an okay day and bought a Coke Zero at the gas station, raised the roof. Who gives a rat's ass?
He got a Coke Zero again?
Ah, that Roman, incorrigible.
Just something they're constantly doing, whether that's spending time with kids one-on-one, sending text messages to kids, going to events, and being out in the public where they see their students. We tell our youth pastors when they first start, you should just hammer relationships all day long.
Where else in society would we want a grown man to be texting and messaging our children?
What about your relationship with Drake? Tell me about your friendship. How did this all come about?
I love him. I met him in Australia, and he's honestly so fantastic and a great friend and a great role model. We just text each other the other day, and he was like, "I miss you so much." I was like, "I miss you more."
But if they have cool hair and say they are on fire for the Lord, we pay them to do it. And then they come to your kids' events.
Show up to the things that are important to them, right? Their school plays or their football games or their cheerleading events, right? You just need to be available. 80% of youth ministry is simply showing up.
Football games, right? Going to see your kids' basketball cheer competitions, going to see their band contest or whatever, right? Hanging out with your kids playing video games, meeting them for coffee. Those common experiences do more than anything to build culture. And again, I think as youth workers, this is one that's probably most in our wheelhouse.
Kind of maximizing your time and energy to be relational.
I love sports. So going to, just last week, I went to 3 innings of one of our seniors' high school baseball games, and he was pitching. I got there a little bit late, and I had to leave early because I had another meeting.
To me, that's perfect.
Oh, it was great. It was great. Got there, said hi to his mom. Said there's a couple of friends that were watching too, but it was really cool because he sought me out that Sunday and said, "Hey, I saw you in the crowd. I just want to let you know that meant so much to me."
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that's one of the biggest ways. I mean, literally was there for half an hour.
Yeah.
And then I left, and then it was done.
Yep.
But to him, it was a big.
I was in a Christmas play once at a church years ago. There was this woman who went to all 3 nights for some reason, and on the last night, she was on the same bus and then the same train as me. And then the next day, she was at my train stop when I went to work and took the train with me to work. And then she was at the train station when I got off work, and this continued for 2 weeks, all while asking me where I lived and trying to figure out where I lived and me having to dodge her. I didn't like that. So anyways, we pay these people to go to our kids' games.
Another great way too, we're in the office. I wish I could be out in everywhere, Starbucks, whatever, go hang out with, but there's work to be done. Yeah. But I think part of the cool, one of the fun parts is when students come into the office.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to just blow them off. I got a ton of stuff to do right now. But to be able to have a student come in and sit on your couch, and then for you to be able to take 5 minutes and just stop and just focus on them for a second and just start to have a conversation with them. Like yesterday, we had a student come in, and I just, hey, she's a senior, getting ready to go to college. She doesn't know where she's going. And we're just kind of talking, and we just had a moment where I said, you know what, why don't we just pray about your conversation? Why don't we just pray about what college, what direction you want to go?
Yeah.
And it was just a cool moment to where I could have easily said, I got to do this stuff. I got a meeting in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But to be able to just stop, and students ruin your workday, but to be able to have that relational aspect where you could just stop and focus on them for a second.
Oh, don't do that. Don't be alone with kids in your office. Are you insane? This was drilled into my head at Bible college and in my internship. And I also have common sense. Does this guy's church have any rules about spending time alone with teens in his office? If not, they should. Oh, okay, sorry. Quick Google, and he was working at Saddleback Church at the time, and this happened a couple years later.
Well, back here in Orange County, members of the Saddleback Church in Lake Forest are reacting today to news a youth mentor was arrested.
CBS 2's Greg Mills tells us he's accused of having inappropriate relationships with youngsters.
So maybe they don't have any of these rules. But at the end of the day, it's not just about relationships for relationship's sake, right? It's all about Jesus.
Is the ones that are lifting Jesus and what they do, and they'll have their events or they'll do whatever they do. When Jesus is lifted, you're seeing those youth ministries grow and that passion for God grow.
Is that teenagers in general have a really hard time articulating the basic tenets of their faith. They say, yeah, I'm a Christian, right? Like I believe in God and I believe the Bible's His Word and some things like that, right? Maybe they know that salvation is through faith and those type things. But when you begin to drill down on the core theological tenets of their faith, studies show that teenagers have a really hard time articulating those. Are you reinforcing core beliefs? See, those core beliefs bind us together. As we think about building a culture, a youth ministry culture, we're bound together by those shared beliefs. The more that you can communicate those to your students, make them a part of your youth ministry, have an environment where maybe you even write out your core beliefs, right? Maybe you even articulate some key theological statements and have them around your youth group. Involve your students, embrace that creativity.
And like I said, that's why you're there as a youth pastor. Parents are scared that their kids might turn into an atheist, and they aren't listening to their parents anymore. So they hand them over to you.
And you lost me. David Kinnaman says that 50% of our students want to go into some science-related field. 50%. 1% of youth pastors in the last year have taught, according to this research, their kids to think Christianly about science.
Think Christianly about science? Think Christianly about science?
So I think there's just a huge disconnect from what they get in Sunday school, from what they get at church, and how they actually practically live out their lives. So I would say a worldview, and I don't just mean intellectually, it's all of life, it's our emotions, it's our relationships. Living out Christianity with a worldview, helping kids see the world and everything in it through a Christian lens, I think is arguably the most pressing issue today. Next.
What are you talking about? How small is your God that science can defeat him if you don't brainwash the kids enough?
To be honest with you, I think it's building disciples. Disciples building and making more disciples. And so do they love Jesus? Do they read their Bible? Are they praying? Are they baptized? Are they spirit-filled? Are they willing to go to their schools and campuses to reach out to their friends who know Jesus? And
wow, you're really great with kids. Thanks, I'm also a youth pastor.
So what I see in youth ministry is I really see young people going out into their schools and really reaching, not just coming to youth services, not just seeing it happen on a Wednesday night or Thursday night or whenever you do youth service, but actually going on to their schools and seeing it happen. And revival isn't one service. I really believe revival is when there's no music, when there's no feelings, when there's no all this hype going on, but when you're just like going to class and you say, walk up to somebody and say, hey, can I pray with you? Hey, I see that something's going on with your life, and can I just believe for something for you? And I believe when young people are doing that, that's really when God's going to begin to move.
Finally, how are you speaking to outsiders? How are you empowering your students to speak to outsiders? How are you communicating to those students that are in your community context? They're in the schools. They're peers of your students, but they're not attending church. How are you talking to them? How are you encouraging and enabling and equipping your students to talk to them as well? So
when I was in youth group, though, this one caused me so much anxiety. There was so much pressure to evangelize to your friends at school, and I felt so bad that I didn't, and it ate me up inside. To be fair, I also didn't have friends in high school, but still it was pushed on me over and over again to evangelize to my friends and to invite my friends out to youth group. But at some point I realized that the youth pastor's success is measured by how many kids come out on a weekly basis. So eventually they have to branch out from the kids whose families go to the church and get you to bring in your friends who may even just go to other churches so that they could pad their numbers. And that whole church-state separation thing means that you can't really send the pastors to the school. You can.
So if someone's like, oh, I want to get on my campus, for example, I don't know how to do that. We would go in and say, hey, here's some practical ways or 20 ways of how to get in a campus.
Are things like going to school lunches, showing up to football practices, right? We'd show up to like football practice or basketball practice with a cooler full of Gatorade.
We want to raise $40,000 to have a campus pastor in every school. Wow. We want to start that program.
Campus pastors are a thing? Leave kids alone for like a minute. And then, of course, there are the volunteers.
And growing this leadership team, what happened is the youth ministry naturally grew as well, right? Because like we said at the beginning of this video, it's all about relationship. Well, you can only have relationship with a certain amount of kids. In fact, there's actually a social psychology term called Dunbar's number, right? It says that we can only physically maintain about 150 relationships, right? Anything more than that and relationships start dropping off, right? It's not a Christian thing. That's actually social psychology. And so that's why so many churches and so many youth groups get get stuck at about 150. It's because in order for you to break through the 200 barrier, you have to switch and you have to start investing in your leadership team, right? And then they can start managing those relationships and you can actually grow past 200.
When I did my internship, it was impossible to get volunteers to the senior high ministry because by the time I got there, everybody was so burnt out. And I've seen it in other churches where the youth pastor took advantage of their volunteers and did everything they could to make them feel like they were their servants. I snapped at a youth pastor once when I was volunteering because he always talked about how we were there to help him and work for him and constantly used the word I or me when talking about the ministry. And it made me so angry. So finally I said, hey, I'm not here for you, man. I'm here because I care about the kids.
You're embarrassing me in front of the pastor.
Leaders to volunteer for that kind of stuff.
Smart youth pastor.
Yeah, exactly. We've had guys shave their legs, just weird, dumb stuff like eat worms.
Yeah, it can get pretty toxic. So, as a result, in a lot of churches, they are desperate for people to help. And a lot of them just don't do background checks. So now you're sending these kids off to build relationships, not with just the youth pastor, but with someone from the church you may not know anything about.
So think about things. How am I connecting them to a small group leader that's going to reach out to them during the week, check on them, pray for them, shepherd them? What am I doing to take these kids on mission with me so their hearts break with the things that break Jesus' heart, so that there's some spiritual experiences that they're having that go beyond what I can possibly do in 2 or 3 hours a week.
So what was crazy about that time is all of the volunteer youth leaders that we had, were rock stars, right? These are guys, and all of us were, 19, 20, 21 years old. We were basically college kids or kind of just a couple of years removed from high school. But all of us had a heart for youth ministry, and we simply wanted to serve the local church. Right? We were raw. We made a lot of mistakes. We did a lot of really dumb things. We had concerts on the roof all the time. We got the cops called on us, right? But we also had like 200 kids show up, right? We made a lot of mistakes. We did a lot of things that you probably shouldn't in retrospect. But we were young and we were coachable.
That's the thing. They think it's funny or quirky that these youth leaders are doing dumb things while they are in charge of the well-being of their kids. And we think it's cool that they aren't much older than the kids. But that whole thing is a powder keg. So anyways, what does this all add up to? What am I trying to say here? You take somebody when they are young, fresh out of college, and sometimes fresh out of high school, and you build them up to be this amazing person who can do no wrong. And then you tell them to build relationships with kids.
As Mark Kuprick sat in court with a mask over his face, his 2 young victims took turns telling Mahoning County Judge Scott Krischbaum what he did to them.
I trusted this man with everything I had. I believed everything that he had told me without question. He used me. He had me wrapped around his finger since I was a little girl, really. I've always felt safe with him.
But prosecutors say the 23-year-old Kuprick manipulated his victims into sexual relationships while both were still teenagers, and he was their youth leader at a local church, convincing them to send nude photos and videos to him, and then he would send them his own.
And then you don't have any accountability.
6-year-old Christopher Reyes, and he's accused of sexting a minor. Reyes reportedly sent inappropriate messages to a teenager for 3 years. The Marco Island Police Department says that Reyes was hired at the Wesley Methodist Church back in 2016, but he has not worked there since last year. We're still working to confirm whether this minor attended the church that Reyes worked for. The church has yet to comment on this arrest.
Timothy Wells has been here in the Collin County Jail with a bond of $25,000 since his arrest on Friday. He's accused of inappropriately touching a 15-year-old girl while working at one of the biggest churches in Wiley. It was back in mid-December when an employee with the First Baptist Church of Wiley contacted authorities about a claim from a 15-year-old girl.
And you open the doors for other people to come in and have access to your kids.
Youth group mentor in Jefferson County is accused of sending explicit photos of himself to younger boys. 20-year-old Brandon White is charged with enticing a child,
landing a church volunteer in jail.
What's more, police say the guy responsible is a convicted sex offender.
And you're shocked and surprised when abuse happens. Almost all of those clips were things that came to light in the past year. I've known way too many people who have been hurt by youth pastors or youth leaders. I've seen way too many churches do little to nothing to make sure it doesn't happen to their kids. And I've seen way too many churches sweep it under the rug when it does happen. It's been 14 years since I was a youth pastor, and past me would never have thought I'd be saying this. But church youth groups are not safe places for kids. Sure, maybe some are, but how can you tell? And are you willing to make that risk? And at the very least, keep churches accountable. Ask them what they are doing to make sure your kids are safe. What background checks are they doing with their volunteers? Are they regularly following up with students? Do they ever audit themselves or have outside sources audit them for concerning practices? Because I think that way too often, people think that putting the label of Christian on something makes it safe, but it really, really doesn't. Hey everybody, thank you so much for making it this far. If you know somebody who may benefit from this one, send it their way. And you have yourself a great day. Stay hydrated, stay cool. It's hot out there. Have a drink of water. Jump in a swimming pool. And stay safe. Thank you. Bye. Once again, thank you so much to our sponsor, Scentbird. Go to scentbird.com. Use the coupon code, believe it or not, 3 at checkout.
Work, Sky Moon.